And this is a video on sex work. And my feelings on sex work have changed a lot since when I was married. Because when I was married, it's like, oh my God, that's so horrible. Because the feeling was that the amount of money that people were getting for this type of work couldn't really compensate for what they were giving, for the risks they're taking, for the physical impact, for the spiritual aspect of it, for having sex that's void of love. But since being single, I've realized that like so many relationship configurations and mental concepts we have around relationships are basically about the woman being an unpaid sex worker. Like things like friends with benefits or situationships or just like all these different arrangements where people are in a sexual relationship, but there's no real love or commitment or devotion or protection or providing or just anything that makes it beautiful. And I feel like in those situations, sex work would definitely be preferable because at least the female is getting something more than nothing. But not just that, I also like the fact that sex work is at least acknowledging the situation for what it is. Whereas I feel like lots of those other types of arrangements, the whole point of them is to kind of obscure the reality, that basically there's nothing there other than somebody getting basically a selfish pleasure. But men always like to focus on the fact that something is consensual, right? And first of all, I think the idea of consensual is really creepy. Like if you have to bring up that something is consensual, if that's your point of pride, like that you're not raping someone, like that's probably not like a really high level relationship. You know what I mean? Consensual shouldn't be the best thing you can say about your relationship. If people want to have a consensual relationship that's just sex and there's no meaning beyond that, I'm not going to like come into their bedrooms and stop them, but I wouldn't consider that superior to sex work. I wouldn't be like, oh wow, that man respects women. I mean, I don't think that man respects women any more than the guy paying a sex worker does. I mean, maybe a little bit less because he's trying to not pay her, he doesn't even want to acknowledge that he's getting something. He wants to be like, oh, it's consensual. We're both getting something. So the question is, are they both getting something in a sexual relationship? And my answer would be no, that in a meaningless sexual relationship, neither one of them is getting anything. It's just that the female is probably going to pay sooner in terms of like possible side effects or heartache, and the man will only pay when he arrives in hell and has to burn for all eternity. But for real, I mean, those relationships are frequently predatory because there is frequently a component of the man knowing that the female wants more than just sex, and so kind of trying to wiggle things a little bit in order to get sex, for which he's not paying. And that's why I think that the man who does pay is more respectable. And in addition, when a man pays, he's acknowledging that he's broken in some way, right? He's like, I'm not giving you what I should be giving you, so I'm gonna like throw some money at you. There's like some kind of acknowledgement of something. Because to me, I still believe in the old-fashioned idea that men should provide, protect, and care for the women. But I don't think that this is something that benefits women over men, because I think when men do that for women, the women automatically give back to the men, and then they both benefit. So when the men try to short circuit that process by just simply getting sex and usually getting the woman's love in exchange for not actually loving her, aka demonstrating love in some palpable sense, I think they are committing a crime against nature, basically. But at the end of the day, it's a vice, and I'm all for vices, right? I think that vices have their place in the world because vices are corrosive forces. Vices are like those, what are they called? Those elements at one side of the chart that like corrode stuff, like fluoride and stuff, whatever. Vices are corrosive forces, and corrosive forces have their place in the universe. So I'm not anti-vice, but what really disgusts me is when people try to turn vice into virtue. Like, that's gross. If you're committing a vice, if you have a vice, just embrace that you have a fucking vice. Don't try to turn a vice into a virtue, you know? And I think that when people try to talk about consensual sex and they try to act like that consensual sex or like friends with benefits or all these different arrangements in which there's sex with no love, and they try to turn it into being about respecting women, about empowering women, about women being equals, that's fucked up shit. You know what I mean? You can't make the fact that you want to fuck a woman without loving her, without protecting her, without caring for her. You can't try to turn that into a virtue by bringing in like things like feminism and equality and respect and, oh, she liked it too. It's like, maybe she liked the fact that you were stimulating her pleasure centers in the sense that obviously it feels good if someone stimulates your pleasure centers. But did she want you to be a worthless piece of shit? Probably not. She probably would prefer if you were a knight in shining armor, but you're not, you know? So it's like, I just don't think that people should try to elevate that sort of thing above sex work. I think it should be placed below sex work as the poor man's alternative to actually paying a sex worker. Thank you. I'm Julian Eckley, and this is my opinion on sex work.